Well, we dive in right away with Ken Rosenthal, who doesn't get a break. No, there's no break. There's the World Series right into free agency. Ken, let's just check in on your health first. How do you need to get some rest? Are you all right? How are you surviving going right from the end of the season to the hot stove?
Brian, I appreciate you asking. I'm doing fine, and I know many, many, many people would love to do what I do, so I never complain about it. It's all good.
See, that's why we love Ken. He has this beautiful perspective, in addition to being, a czar of all things incredible information and knowledge. So, Ken, we're glad to hear you're doing well. And I guess we'll dive into the hot stove. The biggest question is going to be Aaron Judge, right? Like that's at this moment in time, is there anything that you feel confident about when it comes to Judge's free agency, whether it's where he ends up landing, what the general parameters will be for price, a team that's going to go all out for him, or a timeline? Is there anything right now? Because it feels like it's kind of been mysterious for someone who, you'd think the incumbent team wants to keep and he wants to stay, but it feels a little mysterious. So I'm wondering, is there anything that you have like a high bar of confidence on right now around this?
Right, that's a good question. I would say the only thing I'm confident in is $300 million. I do believe he gets to $300 million because of the interest that goes beyond the Yankees. It's an open market, open bidding situation. If you ask me, is it going to be the Yankees? Is it going to be the Giants, the Dodgers, whoever you might want to name in there? I have no idea. And in some respects, it's a quiet period right now, that 5-day period between the end of the World Series and the start of free agency. This is the time when you thought if the Yankees were going to get it done, maybe they would get it done. Now, sometimes it doesn't always work like that, and it takes time, and it happens later. I do believe that there is a chance he leaves the Yankees, and maybe more of a chance than we would have thought, 6 months ago.
I think it's just the longer it drags out. Like, I think the longer this drags out, like you said, this 5-day period where they have the time to sign him, you've seen Edward Diaz deal gets done right away, right after the World Series. So if they were in talks and this was something that was moving, I think that it would have been, we would get an announcement this week. I think the longer that this goes on, the slimmer the chance that he's coming back here.
I agree with that, CC. And hey, you were a free agent once, maybe more than once, and you know how this works. And it's hard to explain to fans. It's even hard for reporters to understand sometimes. There is this respect thing. And it's about money, yes, but the money comes with respect. And listen, he did not like the first offer, even though it was not an insulting offer. He did not like it, did not like that it went public. I don't know how much that is in his head, in his heart. You would think if the Yankees come up with the right number, it's over. They get him, period. But this gets more complicated than sometimes we think because of all the emotions that get involved.
Yeah, for sure. And with somebody that's been in the organization for a long time. You know what I'm saying? Yes. So there may be even stuff that we don't even know about that, that could be bugging him. Little things like that. When you've been in an organization for 10 years, there may be some things that you may want to change. You know what I'm saying? So, you never know what he's thinking.
See, what about if there's, along those lines, guys, with the 5-day period and getting it done in that window. See, if you had played out the season, though, and gotten to this point, even if you wanted ultimately to remain with the Yankees, would you rob yourself of the opportunity to talk to other teams? In other words, like let's say you have a price in mind. Let's say you want 8 years, $340, and you want to stay ultimately. And the Yankees say, hey, here's 8 years, $340, but we want you to sign it before other teams get to talk to you. Are you signing it, or are you still, even though it's what you want, because you waited this long, are you going to give yourself a chance to talk to other teams?
No, and this is what I told Cleveland. And when I was a free agent in 2008, if we don't get this deal done by spring training, I'm going to free agency. I don't give a fuck what happens. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like if the deal's not done by the time we go up to Cleveland, I'm going to free agency. Period. Like. So, and I'm sure 1,000% that's what him and his agent agreed on when they put the deadline, at the season.
Yeah. See, that's the thing I'm wondering about, Ken. Like, so as much as maybe it would make sense to get it done before he's available to other teams, at this point, if you're Judge, even if you want to stay, or you're like, well, I'm not going to get this close and not at least talk to other teams, you know?
Ryan, you hear this all the time from players, even during a season going into their free agency. Hey, I waited my turn. I want to exercise my right under the collective bargaining agreement to become a free agent. 6 years. It's a hard thing to get to. Not many players actually do. So you get to that point. You do want to hear from other teams. You do want to see what's out there. It's only natural. And also it helps your leverage with your original team. So there's no reason in some ways, unless the Yankees come up with something big, for him not to go to free agency. But as CC said, the longer this goes, the more variables you entertain in the mix. And that's the danger of free agency. A lot of people don't understand. It's a wild, wild west, man. When you're a free agent, anything can happen. And a lot of times anything does happen. Freddie Freeman was the classic example, right? So I would not be surprised by any outcome, except I still do believe the 300 is coming his way.
So I want to ask you about Trea Turner. And where do you see a good fit for him? Because I was watching the World Series, obviously, and just looking at the Phillies, and I feel like him at the top of that lineup, you go him, you go Schwarber, Reese, and then Bryce. That's a tough, top four in the lineup. So where do you think, you see him signing?
That's a great fit. And I'm with you, CC. And keep in mind, the Phillies just had this great run. They made a lot of money. And their owner is a guy who is willing to spend and wants to win. Trea knows Bryce Harper. Trea knows Kevin Long, I believe.
He does.
So there's a lot there that would lead you to believe that this could be a possibility. And yes, they do want to get a shortstop, move Stott to second base. Stott's looks like a good player, but at second base, maybe better than short. And my goodness, Trea Turner will be great there. But the Giants are a team that, in many people's estimation, are going to do something. And whether it's Trea, whether it's Aaron Judge, whether it's another of the big shortstops, they can't be ruled out. I don't know where the Dodgers are on Trea Turner. It's almost like the Judge situation. The difference is they traded for him. It's not a homegrown guy. I just don't know if that's his thought process where he wants to be, or if that's their thought process where they want to go. So that's curious to me. And hey, if the Braves lose Swanson, I don't expect them to pay for Trea Turner because they probably have Swanson's number and that's the number they want to be at, but they're going to need a shortstop. So there are a lot of variables here. Boston, if they lose Bogaerts, I mean, a lot can go on with the Turner situation.
But two questions to follow that up. Like, are the Giants just one big free agent away from being you know what I'm saying? Like, are they one free agent away from being a World Series team? And where does that leave the Dodgers then if Trea Turner leaves? Do they try to go out and sign Dansby, or is Carlos Correa coming there? Do they have somebody in the pipeline? So it's a lot to kind of unpack with just Trea Turner's situation.
They need a star. And they kind of lack identity in the post-Buster era. They had Barry, they had Buster. It kind of went seamless. There was a few years there in between, and they had those championships, of course. But now they're a little bit faceless. And let's face it, this is a business. You have to market a team as well. You have to have stars, and they need some stars. So that's why a lot of people expect them to be aggressive. They've been aggressive in the past. They tried Harper. They tried on Stanton. They have done some efforts along those lines, just haven't succeeded. The Dodgers do have Gavin Lux. Now, whether he's a shortstop or not, whether you can play him there full time, I don't know. Correa is an interesting guy for them because Correa is a guy that can't get a qualifying offer. So you would not lose draft picks. You would not lose international bonus space. He's the youngest of these shortstops. Mm-hmm. These are the kinds of things the Dodgers like. But I wrote about this today too. I've heard from their people over the last couple of years that their fans would never embrace Correa because of course, 2017, the sign stealing scandal. He was part of the Astros. The Astros beat the Dodgers in the World Series. I don't buy that. To me, you bring in Carlos Correa, you sign him, and they would only want him on one of those short-term, high-dollar deals, I believe. You bring him in, and all of a sudden your fans say, you know what? This guy's a really good player. And I just think that's gonna be one interesting element of the Dodgers shortstop situation. Do they go for one of these other guys?
Is there a favorite for Correa, Ken?
I don't think so. And I don't think with a Scott Boras client, you can ever say any team is a favorite because things happen with his clients that surprise us all the time. Now, Strasburg with the Nationals, I guess that was an obvious fit. But Rendon to the Angels, that was a surprise. Garrett Cole to the Yankees, that was a natural.
But even Bryce to Philly was a surprise.
Bryce to Philly was a surprise, yes. And what is he looking for? I think we all know what he's looking for. He's looking for the best deal for his client, as all agents are. So nothing would surprise me in that regard.
It's interesting. The shortstop market obviously is it's an interesting one because you have four, potentially really, really attractive shortstops. In a lot of ways, last year, we didn't see the, full maturation of the contracts the way that we thought we were going to with those free agent shortstops. Is there any reason to believe that this year it will be different, Ken, that Carlos Correa does get a 6-year deal instead of what he got last year, that, Xander Bogaerts does somehow, gets more than the 3-year, $60 million he opted out of?
It should be different. And it should be different because historically, Ryan, the first year after a CBA is signed, owners spend.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is pretty obvious. They have security as far as where the sport's going to be for the next 5 years. Mm-hmm. They understand there's not going to be a work stoppage. This sport, and the commissioner said this the other day, generated $11 billion in revenue this season. Coming off the pandemic, here we go. We're right back to where we were. So I would expect, yes, the money will be there and the money will be bigger than it was in certain cases last offseason.
How about, Ken, just along the shortstop market, do you think the Yankees get involved this offseason? Obviously now Peraza's either closer or ready. Volpe is closer, maybe ready. But even like Brian Cashman's comments yesterday kind of made it feel like maybe they would entertain the shortstop market, What do you make of that?
Cashman, and like a lot of GMs, never rules out anything. If they were going to be in the shortstop market, they should have done it last offseason, gotten Correa, and not done the Donaldson kind of philosophgy. That's the one. Listen, all teams miss. We get it. But that one, it never sat right with me because what they did was they set up Minnesota to get Correa.
Yeah.
And they could have had Correa, I presume, on a similar kind of deal. So after all of this time and all this talk about Volpe and Peraza, it almost seems like they have to go down that path.
Yeah.
Now, there are other ways you can do this. You could sign a shortstop, play one of those guys at second base, trade Glaber, maybe get rid of Donaldson, play somebody at third. You could play Volpe at third, right? There are things you can do. I don't know if that's the way they're going to go. They have talked up these shortstops big time, and it almost seems to me there's no turning back. So we'll see. If I were the Yankees, I'd be entertaining everything.
But the thing, I'm saying but there's two of them though. You know what I'm saying? Like they should have maybe traded one of those guys last trade deadline and got another piece, maybe somebody in the bullpen, and then brought Peraza up. When they brought Peraza, they should have let him play. You know what I'm saying? Yes. You look at the Astros and the way Jeremy Pena just was allowed to go out and play. If they would have let Volpe or Peraza just come up and play, then we would know. Now you're going into another offseason where you don't know what you have out of two of your guys that you've talked up. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like you're just sitting in limbo. Like, do you sign Dansby Swanson? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just one of those things where they kind of missed on the trade last offseason with Donaldson and Falefa, and they didn't really get a chance to see if Peraza or Volpe can be the shortstop. And now we're just sitting in the same spot we were last offseason and needing the shortstop.
That's a great point. And you know what? I was talking to somebody this morning. The Dodgers also have a number of young guys that are on the verge, and they conceivably don't have to spend big. They can play those guys, do the same thing. And the person I was talking to was an official with another team. He said, you know what? Look at the Braves, man. The Braves, they bring up Michael Harris. They bring up Strider. They bring up Ozzie Albies and Acuna going back. They are not afraid to do that. And it seems to me teams should take that approach more often, especially when the talent is there. Jeremy Pena, amazing example. Nobody had even heard of this guy really until they lost Correa, then installed him. And I remember, I said this on TV during the World Series, in spring training, Altuve told me, this guy's going to be a superstar. And I was like, no way. But again, he was right.
Players know, though. You know what I'm saying?
Altuve is not a guy who talks like that. He doesn't just anoint every guy. So that meant a lot in my view. And yeah, he's a superstar.
Yeah, I mean, there's I think there's also like, see, you'll obviously know this better than me, but not only do players know, but players get an energy from that, right? Like I would imagine it bothers a player when they see someone who they know can help them and that person's not there helping them.
Well, yeah, it's just like, if you're in the clubhouse and you keep hearing about this uber prospect that's hitting all these home runs in AA and AAA, well, fuck, bring him to the Bronx.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not that much separation between AA and the big leagues at this point. Like in the last 10 years. You know what I'm saying? More teams, like Ken said, need to take that approach where just bring a guy up and let him play. Because when you're sitting in the clubhouse and you hear this uber prospect, this guy's this great prospect, you want to see that in the big leagues. And like you said, Ryan, yeah, it does interject. When you get some energy and some young guys, like when Judge came up and the baby bombers, we had so much fun. You know what I'm saying? Like that is, that can energize your fan base too.
Yeah. Yeah, fans tend to connect with those players as well. Ken, how about Jacob deGrom? Everybody like heard like, oh, Atlanta is the favorite. Atlanta's the favorite for whatever reason during the season. What do you think the contract might look like, and where do you think he's most likely to land or stay?
I do expect the AAV will be 40 plus.
Damn, love it.
Let's have a chance. I still believe, but we've heard Texas, we've heard Atlanta. I'm not so sure about Atlanta. Atlanta is a team that doesn't do that kind of deal. They do all these other deals that enable them to kind of sustain it. They don't have a player who's going to earn more than $22 million on any contract currently on the books. That's kind of amazing if you think about it. Mm-hmm. So could they do it? Possibly. I would expect it's going to be 3 years. It's really interesting with deGrom because we all know when he is on the mound and healthy, it's like nothing we've seen, or pretty close to nothing we've seen. And yet, how often is he going to pitch? No one really knows. And that's the question. So it would be a pause for me. I have a hard time with this one. And I love the guy. I love the pitcher, all that. But it's just a lot of money for uncertainty, and you're not getting total certainty.
How about Verlander, Ken?
I believe he goes back to Houston. And he has a really good relationship with the owner, Jim Crane. And last year, they negotiated the deal together. Verlander was on vacation in Italy, and he's talking to the owner, and they hammered it out. Now, it's more complicated because he's not coming off Tommy John surgery the way he was last year. He's going to come off a potential Cy Young Award, likely Cy Young Award. So I expect it's 2 years, maybe 3, and at a big number, 35 to 40 million there too. And my goodness, after what he did this year, I don't know how you can bet against him. Granted, it wasn't the most innings he's ever pitched. It was only 175 by his standards, not typical, but he was coming off Tommy John surgery. So I would expect next year, given his history and his desire to be a 200-inning guy, he's that guy again. Maybe a little less, but that is a more reliable bet in some ways, even though he's going to be 40 than deGrom.
Just to go back to shortstop for a second, Ken, what is the thought around Xander Bogaerts and the chances that he, ends up somewhere other than Boston?
Certainly a possibility. And what's interesting to me about the Xander situation is that the Red Sox front office, Chaim Bloom, their president of baseball operations, they keep saying, he's our number one priority. He's the guy we want to get done. We are not hiding our intentions. That's what we want to do. Okay. But as with Judge, still not done. More complicated than Judge in some ways because the agent is Scott Boras, who generally seeks market value and gets it wherever he can. So I don't know if that's going to happen. Now, the real question on Xander from a baseball perspective long-term is, will he stay at shortstop?
Yeah.
He worked really hard to improve his metrics, to improve defensively, period, last year. And I would think that after doing that, he'd want to stay at the position. He worked his butt off to get to that level. Now he'll want to be there. At the same time, other teams see him as an infielder who probably should be somewhere else, second base or third base. Of course, he came up as a third baseman. So opinion, Xander wants to stay. Clearly, the Red Sox want him. This should not be that complicated, but here we are.
Yeah.
For free agency.
His best bet to play shortstop is staying in Boston. If he goes somewhere else, he's going to have to move around. He's got to move around.
Yes.
Ken, I think the only other thing I wanted to run by you is if there's any sort of front office shakeups that we can, expect, especially with what happened with the Brewers and Stearns, and whether or not, there's an obvious landing spot there.
Even the Astros, like with James Flick.
Right, and only getting a 1-year deal. Yeah.
Well, we're waiting to hear on that.
Waiting to hear. Yeah.
And a number of us writers believe he's not going to take it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not positive because it's still one of 30 jobs, and sometimes you just have to accept certain things. Not that he should. My God, he just won the World Series. He's not getting a good deal, not a 1-year deal. But that's something that's going to have to play out still as we tape this. Now, as for other front offices, I expect Cashman to be back. I don't know what is taking so long exactly, but I don't know that that's going to be an issue. And I don't expect any other turnover this offseason. We've seen some turnover with managerial jobs mostly, not much with GMs. The Brewers situation, they had Matt Arnold ready. Stearns definitely needed time off. It's sincere from everything I can tell and everything I've heard. Whether he comes back next year, Mets, the Astros, whoever it might be, I don't know. I would not be surprised if he doesn't come back so quickly. A lot of these younger executives, they're really well educated. They can do other things besides baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they want more of a life with their family. Because as you guys know, when you're the general manager or president of baseball operations, whatever you want to call it, it's 24/7. It's nearly 365. And it can burn a person out. So we'll have to see what happens there. But he's out there now for sure.
Ken, you are the best. Thank you so much for all this information, perspective, for always making time for us. We so appreciate it. And hopefully you get some time to relax and chill at some point in the coming days, man.
Ryan, thanks a lot. CC, thanks.
Oh, of course. Thank you. Thanks, Ken. We appreciate it.
Take care, guys.